Welcome to Liner Notes, a podcast about how scholars plan and stay organized and the tools they use. In each episode, I'll be interviewing a scholar about what's in their pen case, or something akin to a pen case if they don't have one, how they play their time, and their secrets to an organized scholarly life. I'm Catherine Rye Jewell, a historian and professor of history at Fitchburg State University in Massachusetts. Our guest today is Maria Angela Diaz, an assistant professor of U.S. history at Utah State University. She has a PhD in history with a specialization in the Civil War era from the University of Florida, an MA also in history from the University of Florida, and a BA from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. She teaches courses in the 19th century United States and Latino and Latina studies. Her recent publications include To Conquer the Coast, Pensacola, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Construction of American Imperialism, 1820 to 1848, in Florida Historical Quarterly, and a chapter in Reconsidering Southern Labor History, Race, Class, and Power, entitled To Carry That Burden, the Texas Cart War and the Place of Mexican Laborers in the Southern Landscape, 1854 to 1857. Her current book project is entitled A Continuous State of War, Empire Building and Race Making in the Civil War Era Gulf South. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you because I feel like we've had these exchanges kind of back and forth in several different moments on Twitter about our love of pens, our love of notebooks. And I've bandied this idea around about a podcast and like we keep coming back to it. So I'm so glad you're here. So we'll launch right into segment one, which is the what's in your pen case, if you have one, or whatever is akin to your pen case, and to highlight 3 items.
So I brought the things that are usually in my pen case. I was talking to my mom about this yesterday because I talk to her every week, especially since the pandemic. And I was like, I didn't think that I had strong feelings about things in my pen case, but I do, because I only use this type of pen. I use no pencils. I use the Pilot G2 10 or 7 bold ink pen.
You like to have a nice, strong, bold.
Yes, I like a nice, I don't like fine point. No, that's not, I have to be, it's like a declarative statement. It's like an exclamation point. And so I like a very bold pen, so a bold line. And then I'm very picky about highlighters. They have to be yellow. So this one's a Sharpie. I feel like I'm on a makeup tutorial, but yeah. They have to be yellow though. I can't handle like pink or green or orange or anything. They have to be yellow highlighters and thick enough so that it highlights the entire sentence, like the whole thing. So it has to, because the ones that are pointy don't highlight properly, and I need a nice thick, once again, line over the book. And then always and forever, because I am a professor, dry erase board markers. I have tons of these. By the end of the semester, my bag is like half full of dry erase markers for all the time. So
always, I'll find them in coat pockets and
yes, I have them in coat pockets, jackets, like everywhere tucked away in my office, up on campus. Forbid. I actually had a student once give me dry erase markers because there was a semester where I just for some reason couldn't get it together, and I always was running out of them. And so I had a student at the end of the semester give me dry erase markers as a gift for a good semester.
That's so nice. So when you're taking notes, when you're using your bold pen, are you writing in the books? Or how do you, like, what's sort of your number one use for these bold pens?
So 2 things. One, when I read for my job for history, I do sticky tabs. So I have sticky notes, the little tabs, and my tabs are color coded. So usually they come with like pink and orange and blue. So in the introduction, what the main thesis is, what the main argument is, and where, whenever that shows up, it gets a bright pink tag. And then, I have different colors for quotes, for things that are specific to my research. That's what I use my pen to write on, is those little, because I don't like to write actually in the book. I will highlight the book, but for some reason I don't like to write in the margins of the book.
Yeah, so you'll write kind of like a little clue for yourself, or like a little code, like this is matching this chapter that I'm working on or this idea.
Or I'll just write like the summary of the last few or the last few paragraphs that go together, and I'll be like, these are the 3 points on this, that you need to look out for. And so I can. It's nice because when when you're looking at your books, and you can always be like, okay, well, I need like a choice quote from whoever, and then I can look at all of the orange tabs are the good quotes. It just makes it easier for me to navigate a book.
I have so much trouble with color coding because I'm always like forgetting which color I'm using for things. And I like it as you have it's pretty streamlined. It sounds like in terms of the color coding. Because I think I had one toolkit of sticky notes and it had like 16 different colors, and I was like, how would I ever? You can get too granular
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
color coding.
Yeah, mine is, I think I worked out like five. So main argument of chapter, really good point in chapter, quote, and something that pertains to my research. And those are the five things I look out for in a book.
So when you're writing, like when you are, engaging in the drafting process, are you using the pens to write things out? Or are you mostly like a on-screen editor? Like is it, or are the tools mostly for reading and teaching?
They're for writing. More show and tell. I have a book journal, and I started keeping journals of research, just my research, when I was in grad school. And so this is for the book project I'm currently working on. This is volume 2. So then I had also, I have several volumes. I have a reward actually on it. I will pay somebody $50 if this is lost and they return it to me. And it's towards the end actually. And so especially when I'm starting a project, I write in the research journal almost every day. When I was doing my dissertation, I wrote in it every morning, just whatever thoughts. And that's for thoughts, because I think that we as historians, obviously we love the sources and we love to think about the sources, but when we're writing this analytical work like a dissertation or a book or an article, we have to be thinking about the ideas and the big ideas. And so for me, the journal and journaling about the research project actually keeps me connected to the ideas that I'm trying to put forward in my work. Right now, like towards the end, I'll just be like, for chapter 2, remember X, Y, and Z. And then when I sit down to actually work on the book or the article or what have you, I flip to whatever it is that I've been thinking about, and I start working on it.
It's like a conversation between you and the book. It's kind of like that intermediary, like the thinking process, but like working it through on paper.
And it's good sometimes if you either can't get to your research at the time, or you're busy or whatever, you can jot down some notes very quickly. I know a lot of people use notes on the phone, and I'll sometimes do that too, but it's just something about like the tactile, having the pen and the journal and writing in it, that just kind of fills an important part of the research process and the thinking process for me.
These things are kind of filtering through the back of your mind as you're like, going for a walk or drinking your coffee or whatever. And then, sort of like an informal congealing, it's kind of a gross word, but like as those thoughts kind of congeal and you just sort of work them through before kind of committing them to the page.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, certainly when I do start writing, I have taken whole chunks of this. And it actually so when I started doing it, it was, I think actually when I was preparing my prospectus for my dissertation, is when I first started to just sort of write down random thoughts. And I actually showed it to my advisor, and when we were talking about what I was going to write about and in my dissertation, and he's like, well, you're doing a lot of writing about, territorial expansion and imperialism, and it's like, you might want to push that more. And I was like, oh yeah. So it's been my little buddy for the majority of my scholastic career.
I like that, how it reveals how you might have certain ideas that haven't really come forward yet. They don't define the work, but through that process of the journaling and kind of giving yourself that space, it allows you to identify underlying themes that you might not necessarily have noticed that were there,
Yeah.
but then Like it's like your subconscious coming through.
I know that a lot of academics battle with anxiety, and that sometimes that can be that can impede the writing process because there's nothing scarier than the blank page.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of steps that I take before I actually get to the blank page. I've adopted lots of strategies to just get my brain going and to just get comfortable with writing.
So for segment two, I ask scholars about how they organize their time, how they organize their writing, how they organize the various types of things that we have to do as scholars, whether it's teaching or another job or service. And so when you're facing that blank page or many of the other things that you have to do, how do you go about organizing your time?
I think of this as like pre-pandemic and right now. So in normal circumstances, pre-pandemic, I usually set aside certain days to write. So like I do my classes, and I'm lucky to have a small load. I know that a lot of people out there do not. And I've been at two other institutions where I did not have. I have a 2-2 load now, which is like, and I've had like 3-4 and 3-3 before, which is not as much as some of my friends who have like a 5-5.
I have a 4-4.
4-4, yeah. I see. That's and so I've tried to be really strict about having all of my classes on the same days, right? And I mean, those days are when I do things that don't take a whole lot of effort, because teaching takes so much effort, and it takes so much attention. And so on days when I'm teaching, I usually that's when I catch up with my email and, do things like that don't require a whole, I mean, yes, they require thinking, but they don't require thinking on the level of research stuff. And then I can devote myself to teaching and prepping for class and all that other stuff. And also, by the end of a day of teaching, even teaching 2 classes, your brain is fried, and it's in part. I think it's actually mostly because I know very few people pay attention for a solid hour, and when you're teaching, especially when you're engaging with the students and you're talking to them and you want to listen to them, you are listening very intently to everything they're saying so that you can formulate a proper response, and that takes a lot of mental energy. All teachers have to do that, and people underestimate how tiring that can actually be, to be that attentive on it, steadily.
I feel like it's like I'm infusing the room with my energy.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm doing something like, economic policy, like I might need to give a little more in some classes than in others, but it takes from me. And I know that people will talk about like, introverts are exhausted by that kind of external push, and extroverts are kind of energized by it. But I think everybody gets tired from that.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel even with Zoom classes and stuff, I definitely feel the teaching high when you're done and you're like, still like, or when you wander around your house still lecturing, which I have done before. I have lectured to my cat on a number of occasions about various things, because I'm not quite done yet.
When on my commutes, I have a long commute, it's about an hour, and it's like I prep myself up. It's like I'm psyching myself up to get there, and then on the way home, it's like they're reflective, like, oh, ooh, I said that, or that was bad, that came out bad.
Yeah.
But it is. I always referred to it, especially when I was teaching like 4 days a week, and I would have 2, 2, and 2. It was like 2 performances a day, like got the matinee show to do, because it feels performative.
Yeah, it is. It's very performative. I mean, in my own daily life, I'm a fairly happy person, and in my own daily life, I smile a lot. But this is being on Zoom. I have noticed for the first time how much I smile at these poor children when they are like saying something, and I'm like, and I'm like, oh Jesus, what is wrong?
I call it my Muppet for History routine too. Like.
Yeah, no, I'm a total buffoon in class. Like I'm sarcastic and I make jokes, and I talk about like when they created the Constitution, it was like a Beyonce surprise album that no one wanted, is what it is. And so I say like ridiculous things all the time. Yeah, on teaching days, I just can't do any. My brain does not settle down, and so I can't do any research. And when it does settle down, all I want to do is like stare at TV. I'm very much like an on-off person. Like I'm an extrovert until I'm not, and then I have to go into my cave. But so far as like on research days, I really try to be pretty strict about shutting everything else out. I know that a lot of people, have to teach every day, and so they have to mark out specific hours. And I recognize that I'm not a morning person at all. I'm very bad at being a morning person. Like I'm just now starting to wake up, and it's like 10:30. So I actually don't get rolling in terms of writing until probably afternoon. So I actually like about 1 to 5 or 6 is research time. Before that, it's reading time. And so I do things in chunks. Pandemic, I do things whenever I can.
I think it's so important to understand when you work best.
I have nothing but admiration for people who can wake up at like 6 in the morning and just get to it. But I can't. My brain doesn't wake up like that, and I don't even think about writing stuff at that point. And so usually that's when I do reading. I do something not as challenging, I guess. And so I'll read stuff, or I'll do, take notes on research materials, primary sources. Once it gets to be past noon, like I can just zero in on what it is that I want to work on. And then I am also a big believer, like, yes, if you are being productive at that moment, if you are writing and you are doing a good job, you need to keep going. You need to just
go with the
ride
flow.
the wave. It's like surfing, right? You catch a wave, you just ride it as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I've heard that advice a lot of, do your writing before you do anything else. Like that first half hour before you even check your email. Like, get in a half hour of writing. And like I tried that, but for me, it really doesn't work. It's like I need that ramp up time. I kind of need to like clear my throat through those different activities.
I'm a big believer in very much working according to your own sort of natural rhythms. And because I'm also, I don't know, rebellious, and even if I try to tell myself what to do, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna look at dresses on ModCloth for 2 hours. Like
I can totally do that.
instead of writing. And so I have to kind of like trick myself a little bit, like, okay, you're, this is what you're doing now. And then I get into it. And once I do, then I'm, I have no real problems with it. And to get to, in terms of research, I am a big believer in free writing. I think free writing is really important, for me anyway. It's the way that I, from journaling to actually starting to write a project, I start with free writing. I actually don't do outlines until I start to until after the free writing is when I start to do like vague outlines. But I'm also not a very organized person in that way. I know that some people do great, fantastic outlines, but I just can't think that way yet. And so my writing process tends to be pretty organic. I will just start a project by just writing everything I think. Like I'll set a timer for 10 minutes and I write straight through. And sometimes I do, it is like, this is stupid. Why am I writing this? Oh my gosh, this is not gonna work out at all. This article is weird, or something like that. And then I start to get like, okay, well, these are the ideas that I want to, talk about, or these are the people that I want to talk about. And then I can list all the questions that I have just going on in my head.
It's like sort of like with the themes that we talked about earlier, that the structure and the questions kind of reveal themselves through that process. It's like you get it out there, and then you can go back through and say like, oh, look, like here's sort of these ideas, and like maybe I talked about this idea down here related to this other thing, and I'm going to move it up here. And when I do that, like the whole thing kind of becomes clear.
And also, it's just you get raw material to work with, right? It's like sculpting something. And so you get a big batch of raw material. Then you can start to, like you said, see the themes, but also see the outline of the project and how you're actually going to do it. I'm working on an article right now, and it's actually about two people. It's about John Brown and this other guy named Juan Cortina, which most people have not heard of. They both commit like these armed incidents, the raid on Harper's Ferry. And then Juan Cortina goes and lays siege to this town in Texas in Brownsville, and he, captures the town, and then he starts this massive, not really huge war, but this war along the U.S.-Mexico border at the same time that John Brown is, committing this raid on Harper's Ferry and the Arsenal. And so when I was thinking about the article, I was like, I don't really know how exactly I'm going to organize this, and so the free writing helped, because then I started to see, okay, well, I'm looking at these people, these two guys, and their sort of parallel lives and these parallel incidents. And so, okay, so I'll start with the incidents, and then I figured out, oh, I also want to talk about like the memory of these things, why one is remembered as essential, as the sort of precursor to the Civil War, and the other one is virtually forgotten as this like weird incident. But it was something that was on like the front page of the New York Times, a lot. And so, yeah, I started to sketch out like, okay, these are the subjects and these are the themes, and this is how it's going to be organized all through just kind of reading about these guys, and then me thinking about what I want to look at.
So for segment 3, this is the secretive section. And so I'm wondering if you have any secrets that you can share about an organized scholarly life.
When you're doing archival work, I think that it's important to be very, very organized. This is actually where I do get pretty organized. Be very organized in what you're looking at, especially when it comes down to down to the folder, like, making sure that you document which folder, and, everything about a primary source is, of course, essential. Before the archives, you do a lot of prep work. Everybody looks up stuff and they make a list. I have a research commentary that I use while I'm in the archives. So I have my little laptop, and then the box, and then the thing I'm looking at. And as I'm going through the material, I'm photographing, but I'm also scanning very quickly, like what the letter or the journal or whatever it is that's in front of me is saying. And if it piques my interest, I will actually stop and I will transcribe some of the choice pieces in a commentary. And so, and everything has a very specific heading and everything. And what I found when I was doing any kind of writing, but the dissertation and then also revising the book, was that actually the bulk of the good stuff was the stuff that I transcribed while I was in the archive. Like I found some jewels that I had taken pictures of, like the last 2 days when you just need to get the stuff.
Yeah, you're grabbing it all.
Yeah, you're just grabbing it. You're just like, okay, I'm leaving tomorrow. I have got to get this done today, that time. But most of the time, it's the things that first catch my eye. And so my research commentaries, and I do one per archive. And once again, those also, once I got to having a draft of something and then maybe going back into the archive, I can be like, okay, this will be good for chapter 2, and this will be good for chapter 3, and this will be good for this. And so, it's just another way to easily kind of put the first or the primary drafts together. I think actively paying attention to what you are looking at in the archives is really important. I fall into the trap of just photographing like everybody else does, but stopping to really take that first look and make note of it is I think essential.
And it is funny how it doesn't even take a whole lot of time. Like I had a research trip where I had 2 boxes at Adelphi University on Long Island, and then I had 2 boxes at Columbia University, and I managed to get to those 2 archives in the same day. And, so I was at Adelphi for maybe 2 hours, but I noticed enough. And there was like one like particularly like salacious quote of the racist president talking about the hip hop on the station. Mm-hmm. And it like stuck in my head. And so like as I was driving from Adelphi to New York City, I was like ruminating like, oh my gosh, this is like the center of this chapter, like going to be a whole new chapter, and like the whole third part of the book. Like even just little quotes and just marking like it's in folder 2, start there, can like launch you.
Yeah, and I know that so many of us have, I do, certainly hundreds of photos. Those old school ways of doing, like, before you had the camera, when you were hardcore transcribing, it seems like it takes forever, but especially, in this day and age when I know that grad funding is always, tough to get. And, I had the benefit of my parents being retired and not minding going to some random, like, they're not random places, but certainly they went to probably southern towns a little bit more than they had wanted to. I'm lucky that one of the places I research on and study in my book is New Orleans. And so it's not hard to get the parents to want to like fork over some money to spend time with their daughter in New Orleans. So, so they would sometimes help me out. And certainly they would help me out with like buying me at least a couple dinners while they told me about their adventures in New Orleans. I was like at the historic New Orleans collection. They would be like, we did all these things. And so, when you're on that shoestring of a budget, like, buying peanut butter and jelly to keep in your room while you're researching, that kind of thing. And it seems like you want to just get in and grab everything, but stopping to really think, oh yeah, no, this is a good one. There's something here, and making that note to yourself.
Yeah, to be kind to your future self.
Yeah, be kind to your future self, because there are a number of times where I was like, dang it, Angela, from 3 months ago, why didn't you do this thing that I have to do now? So yeah, that's a very common talk I had with myself. But
yeah, I feel that. I had to do my research for my dissertation at an archive where they didn't yet allow digital photography. And luckily my grandparents were still alive and lived nearby. And so like I would go home, back to Lebanon, Tennessee, and be able to stay with grandma and grandpa. But it was challenging, and I was really glad that I had those notes. They were like riddled with typos, which was a bad thing. But I had that research to write from, and I think it did help. And I did use photography at others, but I was so new to it, and it wasn't a central part of my research process that I didn't realize when I was doing it that I was cutting off the folder labels.
Yeah.
And so I had to go back and like recreate all of that citation stuff and like go to the archive. I had to go back to the archive for one collection because it was so hard to figure out where stuff was. It was a disaster. So like I'm very cautious now about making sure that stuff is in the photo and like doubling up with like the log.
That's why I started keeping a log of like everything I look at, and also a running commentary on what it is and whether it's good or not. And so I do like a lot of personal connection with, I didn't realize this, but I do a lot of personal connection with my research apparently. Like I'm having these conversations constantly. And so like in my commentary, it really is like a running commentary on like what Albert Sidney Johnston said this, and this, and these letters are good, but these letters are not good. And a whole journal full of, people talking about the weather. And so I'll like sometimes be like, this is terrible. What are you talking about? Or it's a weird kind of engagement with the sources, but I do evaluate, sometimes what they're saying, or like, this dude's going to be broke in 3 months. I don't know why he's
Well, it's very funny because, like the title of this podcast is Liner Notes, and it's like you're creating your liner notes for the archive, like the informal.
Yeah. Like I do use the Albert Sidney Johnston papers and then his family. And there's one where he's kind of like, his son writes stuff that makes it seem like he doesn't actually want to do, I think he's a lawyer or something. And I was like, you didn't, and then in parentheses it'd be like, he did not want to be this. He wanted to be a poet. And so something like that. Like that's my reading of the situation. So yeah, I'm like, Albert Sidney Johnston must have been a kind of a jerk father or something like that. It's gonna get hate mail from Albert Sidney Johnston fans. Sorry.
What the archive said.
Yeah. So no, I do kind of create my own. My cat is here. So
Aw, the cats know, I swear, that there's something recording, and they're like, hi.
Yeah, like, hey man.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah. This was really fun. Thanks for having me on. This was cool.
Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of Liner Notes. For more information about the podcast or my research, visit my website at katherinejewell.com. That's Jewel with 2 L's. There you can find show notes for the podcast as well as future episodes. Thank you.